Hello there guys, it's Joey, and this week we're going to have two of the Prisma Visions Tarot. I meant to do this card on Friday, and Friday got away from me, and the weekend got away from me, and this week is getting away from me. So I'm going to do this one, and then I'm going to do the next one tomorrow or the day after. So I picked the Knight of Chalices, otherwise known as the Knight of Cups usually, in the tarot setting. So what I am doing with these Prisma Vision tarot cards, if you're not familiar with the series, is each week, or every other week depending on what happens, I shuffle through and pull a card. I then give my feelings on the artwork in particular after we've read through the description given to us in the book from James R. Leeds, and usually that's it. It kind of pokes into a little bit of spirituality this week, last week technically, but generally speaking I'm preferring to do it this way rather than giving an overall week of my spiritual experience, which is what I was doing, but it was getting more and more personal, so I think it's better that we stick to discussing the card imagery and how I feel about it, and little bits of hints here and there. So from the booklet, and we will zoom in slightly so you can see him a bit better. He's here. Helmet flung open, the knight rides the bucking river spirit. Its convulsive path tosses him this way and that, but he is determined to remain atop it, digging his knees into its scintillating scales. At the apex of the snapping tail, he looks below and sees beauty all around him. Choked with emotion, he raises his glass to love and passion. Unfettered, if I can read my own handwriting. Emotion is a powerful thing, knowing no barriers, no painful ends, it marauds on endlessly. Deaf to the diminishing voices, cavalier devotion to matters of the heart can often lead to swift dethroning, but at the apogee of your quixotic journey, have no fear of the imminent plunge. Mount your furiously swirling emotions and ride them to the end. The Knight of Cups Chalices I resonate most with is actually the Mary L's Knight from the Mary L tarot deck. I much actually prefer that image myself. It's about a knight on the Grail quest whose heart bleeds into the cup with the utter conviction of his yearnings. That card is far more sombre than the image presented here, where the knight is jubilant, carefree and perhaps reckless. As a result, it becomes a completely different feeling card. The knight may still be adamant in his quest, but feelings of how selfish he can be seems to creep in. This knight doesn't appear to be on a quest for a spiritual grail. He already has a cup and is celebrating his triumph over the water river spirit. Perhaps this card strikes a better image for the negative character traits of a person this card could represent. So this is my first initial feeling. There was this quite frequently, not always, but quite frequently, the Knight of Chalices can represent a person within readings, and it can also represent you within a reading. So it can represent traits of a character, traits of a person, and there's something about this card that kind of rubbed me the wrong way last week. Like I was seeing the negative traits of a person within this card. This element of recklessness, this element of complete lack of responsibility and awareness. The archetypal Western Knight, as suggested by his armour, again, I hope you can see, is also at odds with the river spirit. The river spirit, as presented by the image, feels to me to be quintessentially Japanese, or perhaps Chinese. Although Japanese springs to the forefront of my mind first, The Naga, the snake-like beings resembling clouds, are among the 8 classes of deities who worship and protect the historical Buddha in Buddhism. In both Japanese and Chinese mythology, there are also spiritual dragons who rule wind and rain, but also cause flooding, and dragons who cleanse the rivers and deepen the oceans. The following quote is from Derek Walter's Encyclopedia of Myth and Legend, Chinese Mythology. In complete contrast to Western mythology, dragons are rarely depicted as malevolent. They can be fearsome and very powerful, but they are equally considered just, benevolent, and the bringers of wealth and good fortune. The dragon symbol is the sign of authority. Dragons are generally considered to be aquatic, living in lakes, rivers, and the sea. The larger the expanse of water, the more powerful the dragon. And that's the quote from the Encyclopedia of Myth and Legend. It is odd then that this card initially presents a concept, knight as hero mounting the beast dragon, an image which I feel quickly needs to be dismissed, and I personally started siding with the water spirit instead, perhaps because of the Knight of Chalice is perhaps the character of the Knight of Chalices as a card is better served by seeing the character as being a balance of these two characters. Perhaps they are both aspects of the personality of the knight. They become the fusion of Western and Eastern iconography, the balance between the ego, which is the knight, and the spiritual, the dragon, between joy, which could be the knight, and duty, the dragon. The rider and the mount aren't actually separate, but reflections of the same person, like light on the ocean waves, represented by the spiral of water that almost passes through the knight, where a salmon fish leaps over his chest and heart, which I'm guessing you can't see very well. Let's see if we can... I don't know how well you're going to be able to see, but right here is a fish, which I immediately thought of as salmon, over his chest, over his heart. The salmon is a symbol of wisdom in Celtic tradition, literally suggesting here that the overarching image could be about the wisdom of the heart. The head is largely forgotten as the knight has thrown his helmet, aka his protection, open and embraces fully, even to recklessness, his emotions. The head of the water spirit is off card completely as well. Beneath in the water we see 2 loops of what I assume is a sea monster, representing danger lurking in the waters beneath, sort of reaffirmed by the redness as well of the colour scheme of the monster. The knight carries on regardless, showing his weaknesses, aka his recklessness. The water spirit presumably has no fear of sea monsters, as the earlier quote states that they are, in fact, dragons are in fact the ocean and therefore everything within them. The sea monster takes on an almost bloody appearance in its red, being in stark contrast to the river spirit, although the knight has some red on his armour. Perhaps this denotes the knight has been through previous battles and blood splatter from them. Therefore he is bloodied, he is not without experience. Is he reckless or just fearless? Perhaps he has not fallen yet and has not received the lesson of humility that is required for the transition from being a knight to being a king. Prideful arrogance or jubilant youth, it's a thin line. Currently the knight is amongst the stars, but he is not working with the water spirit. He's trying to dominate it because it is bucking and struggles against his exertions. The knight is not secure, not in his position, and nor is his grip on his emotions. He is seeking to dominate them rather than embrace them. Interestingly enough, while this card was active, as I call it, I actually purchased a megalodon tooth. This is a megalodon tooth. It's an ancient sea monster, an ancient shark tooth, which is symbolic of the hunter/predator instinct, raw primal power, and given that it looks like a raven head, people actually thought it was a raven head when I shared pictures of it. I think it speaks volumes to its meaning to me personally, so the raw primal power of the Morrigan in hunter aspect. The knight in this picture has no visible weapon or shield, and his armour would sink him, death if he fell. Despite his apparent experiences, portrayed by his bloodied armour, he seems woefully unprepared, having no weapon. The sea monster is ever ready. Is this actually a triple personality metaphor, id, ego and superego, as presented by Freud? The id is the primal, monstrous element of the self, capable of ripping things apart, lurking in the depths. The ego is the desire to control and dominate everything, the knight, and the superego being the values, morals, and conscious ideal self. It got a bit psychological. I felt a bit bad because I felt a little bit like I was condoning this knight. Because the Marielle is much more my kind of knight. Serious in his spiritual quest, and it all comes from his heart. And the Marielle one is one of my favourite knights. But there was this interesting thing that came across, like, is the whole card different elements of the knight? Are we given glimpses into the primal energy of what drives us? Is the sea monster our primal id selves? Is this beautiful water spirit our higher self? And the physical knight in this picture, who doesn't take up much of the image, to be honest, the ego. It's interesting how most of the card is actually also three sort of different elements of being. There is the water, there is the mountain, the earth in the background, and there is the sky. And earth, sea and sky are Celtic traditions of sort of elements of being. So it ties into that as well. Although, interestingly enough, I think you could probably say that this card is mostly dominated by sky. Because, let's move the tooth out of the way. So that much of the card is water, that much of the card is earth, and then the rest is sky. So there is an element of dreaming in this card. The seeing all these beautiful stars and this limitless possibility, and the jubilantness of the night sky. And it's sort of, there is the opportunity to really, if one would, seek out one's destiny and be guided by the stars. And very possibly that's what the water spirit, the river dragon, is being guided by, and the knight in his overexertions is ignoring it. He's ignoring the water beneath him, the danger to him, and he's ignoring the wealth of his emotions as well as the wealth of knowledge in the spiritual sky. So I feel a bit bad because I think I'm a bit mean to this particular knight, but I can see how there would be positive and negative sides of this card so easily. How dwelling on one thing and over-celebrating or not celebrating enough and not being aware of things and not keeping your eyes where they need to be and trying to dominate something rather than embrace it and become part of it is problematic. So these are my feelings about the Knights of Chalices from the Prisma Visions Tarot. Apologies for it being late, but there you go. Many blessings.